Hi everyone. So for this session we're going to be applying the idea of urbanization again, but this time to high income countries, or in Edexcel they call them very high human development countries. And we're going to again link this to a city in the UK because there's a big focus on the UK with the exams the last few years. So we're going to be looking at the idea of migration, both national and international, and the impacts that might have on an area. We might call that the host country or the host city. We're going to again look at the challenges and opportunities facing people who move into these cities. And students, especially for AQA, need to know an example of urban regeneration as well. So an area that's going through regeneration, which is like an improvement project. So as before, students need to know some of these keywords, and again I would be pausing the video and getting some of these down. So the words that students need to know are national migration, which is when people move from one place to another but within the same country. International, inter comes from the French or Latin entre, which means between. Okay, and nation, a country, so it just means between countries. That's how I remember it. Or if you represent England internationally, you represent them as a country level. So it's the movement of people across international borders. In other words, from one country to another, to stay there, not just on holiday. Urban sprawl is a great phrase that students need to know, and that's like the spreading. So I think of a sprawling out on the sofa, okay, which is just like the spread of towns and cities into the area around it, usually into the countryside, which is not a good thing. Dereliction, I know you can't see that, but I'll just read them to you. Dereliction is where buildings are abandoned. I'm sure you can think of some buildings near where you live which have been abandoned. And then deprivation, that should say deprivation, is where an area is deprived, which means it lacks access to basic resources. Okay, so a high street might be deprived, for example. Excuse me. Okay, I appreciate you probably can't see this very clearly, but I'll just summarize it for you. Basically, the bigger the green circle, these are called proportional symbols. Students need to know that. And the bigger the shape, the bigger the value. In this case, we're talking about the amount of people moving in to an area, okay? And you can see here, this big green circle here, it says there are 100,000 people, okay? So if any of the cities are this sort of size, we're talking about 100,000 people moving there in this 5-year period from 2007 to 2012. I think it's pretty clear that London has a heck of a lot of people moving there, okay? And this is from other countries generally. Some other popular cities like Birmingham, which is the UK's second most industrial city, Manchester, Sheffield, and there's some in Scotland as well. So generally where our sort of major cities are is attracting a lot of people from overseas. Okay, but why? What are the impacts of this? So we're going to focus now on the good things and the bad things about people moving to an area, and we can relate this to cities or countries on a sort of international level as well. So the good thing is people move to a city, they're going to boost the local economy. Generally, people who are moving to cities are quite highly skilled, think doctors and dentists, therefore they pay higher tax rates, and therefore they're going to boost the economy. They're also going to spend their disposable income in shops and local businesses. They bring about cultural diversity. Okay, you could go to St Paul's Carnival in Bristol. You can go to the Notting Hill Carnival in London. You can go, to the Polish shops in Southampton. Okay, so they bring that cultural diversity as well. So we can try different foods and have different experiences. And another thing, a problem in this country is that we have an aging population, which means we don't have a very high birth rate because we have good contraception and we choose not to have many children because they cost a blooming fortune. Trust me, I know, I've got 3. And we also have very good healthcare, which means people are living to a really long age. And that means we have an aging population. So if lots of youngsters move in from other countries, they're going to help to balance that out. However, if lots of people are moving in, that's going to put a strain on our services. There's going to be issues waiting for appointments at healthcare facilities, doctors, dentists, that sort of thing, pressure in school as well. And there might be some conflict with locals, okay, between locals and people who are moving into the area. Okay, so looking at Bristol then, this is what we call a population pyramid. So students need to understand these. Generally, you have males on one side, females on the other, and you have ages along the side. So you can get an idea of what the makeup is like of a place, okay? And in Bristol specifically, you can see this screams to me that lots of people are moving there, okay, for work, because a big chunk of the portion of people in Bristol are of young sort of working age, okay? And it is the largest city in the southwest with nearly 500,000 people. It's one of the country's core cities as well. And they think this population is going to continue to grow by another 159,000 in the next sort of 9 years. Okay, so the population's always grown in Bristol. It's buzzing. If you've not been to Bristol, it's an amazing city, lots of opportunities, which we'll explore in a second. I'm already trying to plug it as a university location for my kids when they grow up, but I've been told by my wife to let them make the choice. So as before with Rio, if lots of people are moving to an area, there are going to be some challenges, and some of these are the same as with Rio, but to a different sort of scale. I'm just going to go through some of these with you now. So this idea of urban sprawl we talked about earlier, if people are moving to towns and cities and not enough space, people will start growing the city into what we call a greenfield area, which is a place that's never been built on. So it's like the countryside. And of course, that's going to have environmental impacts. Dereliction. Lots of abandoned buildings, okay? A lot of our major cities now have declining industry since deindustrialization. A lot of our industry now is overseas. So we've got a lot of abandoned buildings, which are quite an eyesore. This idea of inequality, so most cities will experience this. I live in Poole, and Sandbanks is the fourth wealthiest place in the world to live per square metre, compared to other places, which I won't name, but we've got a real sort of mix, okay, in Poole. In Bristol, they've got two places. One's called Filwood, which is extremely deprived and run down. And they've got a place called Stoke Bishop, which is a lot more affluent and wealthy. And you can see a couple of comparisons here. Stoke Bishop gets 300 crimes a year compared to Filwood, which has 1,300, so 1,000 more crimes. The education is going to be a lot better in Stoke Bishop as well. People are going to pass more GCSE exams, much higher pass rate. And the life expectancy is 5 years longer. And that's things because you've got good access to quality foods, but more sort of open green spaces for better air quality. Those sorts of ideas are going to increase your life expectancy. Okay, however, there is still a problem with air pollution. Again, lots of people in the cities, lots of cars, still some industry there, the major ports. 200 people die a year. Nowhere near as many as Rio, where there are 5,000 deaths a year. But that's still quite a big number, isn't it, for a high-income country? Bristol, 200 people die a year from air pollution, respiratory problems. And there's 500,000 tonnes of waste per year as well. So again, we've got food waste, going to the bins. We've got other types of litter, human waste as well, and that equates to 500,000 tonnes per year. And again, if we're thinking about what are the sort of most significant challenges here, these are the themes I was talking to you about earlier. You've got to try and remember some of these themes. You've got to think about who would agree with you and disagree. Okay, how could we categorize social, economic, environmental? Will it have an impact in the short term or the long term? Will it affect the area locally within Bristol, on a country level, if we're talking about air pollution and global warming, or even an international level around the world? Okay, so there's just a few ideas there. However, why are people moving there in the first place? What are the opportunities in Bristol? And again, what are the best opportunities here? Always thinking about assessment, trying to give your opinion. How could we categorise these? Some are social, like the shopping centre. They've got Cabot Circus Shopping Centre. Costs £500 million to build, but provides lots of jobs. They've got 50 microchip companies. Now, we call this quaternary industry. Think really high-tech microchips, okay? Advanced science and research, medicine. This is quaternary industry, which is like the highest level types of jobs you can get. And there's 50 microchip companies in Bristol alone. And that's the second largest in the world after Silicon Valley in California. There's 2 universities there to choose from. And the government recognises how important Bristol is a place. It's given £100 million as a grant, so that's free money, to help improve their broadband and become a super connected city. So this is enticing lots and lots of people of sort of working age and students as well. And we talked earlier about the environmental challenges like the air pollution. So they are doing some things to fix this. They encouraged a little while back every primary school pupil to plant a tree. Again, that's going to bring in that carbon dioxide. It's going to give us more oxygen. We've also got schemes such as the Bristol Cycle Strategy and the ITS, which stands for the Integrated Transport System. This is where you have like park and ride schemes, you have cycle routes, and the whole point is to reduce congestion and traffic within the roads. So it reduces stress, people can get to work quicker, it improves people's mental and physical health as well. And of course, again, improving air quality. Instead of building on greenfield sites, we're encouraging people to use the abandoned buildings, the derelict buildings, and convert them. These are called brownfield sites. So a site that's previously been built on. It's already got the footprint there. It's not going to cause any more harm. And they have got 300 parks. Wow, that's a lot. Again, improving mental health, improving physical health, encouraging exercise. Just being around nature improves mental health massively. It also improves your mental cognition and your brain capacity as well. There's research to suggest that. So get out lots of nature walks. A little bit of guidance from me there as well. But in terms of Bristol, this is going to fix some of those environmental challenges. So they might call this urban greening, okay, making Bristol a greener place. Okay, and the last thing you need to be aware of is this idea of urban regeneration, this idea of improving towns and cities. Okay, the example which we're going to look at is a place called Temple Quarter, and previously, as you can see from the first picture, extremely derelict, okay, and run down, a real eyesore, one of the first things that people saw as they were coming into Bristol. But now you can see massive improvements, okay, and we'll look at what they've actually done here. So they've electrified the railway to make it quicker so people can commute to London. They've got these things called enterprise zones, which means a business zone where they offer sort of free rates, okay, to encourage new businesses. They've regenerated the high street as well to encourage new shops and bars and restaurants to open up. And Brunel's engine shed, a lot of history there. They've converted that into a big sort of centre for innovation, and 10 of the 50 microchip companies we talked about earlier are based there as well. So again, encouraging that quaternary industry. Those students that finish university can go here and get a really good high-earning job. And so there's been lots of positives. It's created 3,000 jobs so far, but this is set to increase. It's improved environmental quality. A lot of what they're doing involves the urban greening, the cycling strategy we talked about earlier. They're going to use renewable energy in a lot of their buildings. And again, it's brought in a much younger population to balance out that aging population. But with regeneration, or gentrification is like an A-level term, if you improve an area, the house prices will go up. And so the locals who were managing to live there and could afford the sorts of shops that were there and the rent prices now can't. So they are forced out. So there's a big sort of social negative aspect there. And it's cost a lot of money, £30 million. The electrification of the railway actually cost £2 billion. Okay, transport improvements are very expensive. Okay, so some negatives there as well. So in terms of exam question, here's a 9-marker plus 3 spag marks from a few years ago from an AQA paper. And you've got figure 5A and 5B here, which is 5A this one and 5B this one. Study figure 5A and 5B, which were taken at point X on figure 4. You don't need to worry about that. There was just a map extract with this. They show the same location before and after a regeneration scheme. So it says, suggest how a regeneration project can solve urban problems. Use figure 5A and figure 5B and a UK example you have studied. 9 marks plus 3 spag marks. 3 spag marks, just spell your words right. We're encouraged as examiners to give out 3 marks unless they're getting it wrong, unless you're getting it wrong. So clear paragraphs, good use of terminology, and good punctuation and grammar as well. But let's look at the question. Suggest how a regeneration project can solve urban problems. So straight away, you've got to talk about, well, what problems can this urban regeneration that we can see in the second picture, what problems can it actually fix? So you've got to go back to those challenges from earlier, okay? This idea of dereliction, this idea of social inequality, okay? This idea of air pollution, and how can some of the things that we can see in picture 5B fix some of those problems? So I'd be encouraging my students to look at the fact that they've encouraged lots of new businesses in here. That might solve the problem of inequality because it's going to boost up the more sort of deprived area. They've got improved lighting. Okay, you've got to look really carefully in these pictures. You've got to really explicitly refer to the figure to get good marks. You can see improved lighting, which can make people feel safer and reduce some of those crimes. Okay, they have pedestrianised the road, which means they've taken away the traffic, the cars, which again is going to improve air quality and reduce some of those 200 deaths a year. So you've got to be using the figure. But it also says to use an example you've studied. So I'd be using Temple Quarter, and I would be saying, this has already employed 3,000 people, and this is going to help reduce social inequality as people boost their income and spend money in the local area. So if I was answering this, I would probably encourage students to have one paragraph where they compare figure 5A and 5B and address those urban problems. And my second paragraph would be all about my personal example, which is Temple Quarter. And then I might do a conclusion. In fact, I would do a conclusion, I would say which improvement is best. I'm giving my opinion, I'm evaluating, okay? I might talk about those themes we explored earlier. Okay, suggest how means give me reasons for. But we'd be looking for AO3 marks, which means evaluation and assessment. So I'd be looking for, short-term versus long-term, categories, okay, local, international, global scale, counter arguments. And these are the sort of themes that are going to help students get literally 8 or 9 marks on a 9 marker, or 8 out of 8 on an A marker if you're with Edexcel. Okay, good. Hopefully that's helped. It's quite a long one. Make sure you've made lots of notes, and if you want to have a go at attempting that question, I think that'd be really good practice using the notes that you've made. Cool. See you on the next video.